And live from the internet, it's ZN Live. And welcome to episode 390. It's a kind of round number, so we're almost at 400. Very exciting. I'm Phil Weiss, CEO and founder of ZN, and I'm joined as my co-host with Jesus, the COO of ZN and resident artist. And we have a very special guest today, Raquel Torres, who is a senior communication officer for EEA Norway grants. She's also got extensive experience supporting entrepreneurial, young people, and communication in general. But actually, she's been doing something very interesting in recent times. She's doing a course from MIT on AI. And I know that she's actually in the middle of some of these courses right this minute. So this has been kind of the big topic. We talked about it. We've been talking about it online. There has been a lot of hype around it. Now you have kind of decided to take a plunge. So maybe tell us a little bit about why did you choose this course and what is it about and what are your takeaways so far?
Yes, so as you said, Phil, there's been a lot of hype, and we communicators, we've been trying to understand how we can implement it in our daily lives. And basically, one of the reasons why I decided to go for this program, which is on how we can apply generative AI, is the application aspect of it. But now that I'm halfway through, I can say that most of it has been understanding generative AI, how we build large language models, and then the application side. It's still something that is going to be continuously changing in the months and years to come. There are tons of tools available nowadays, and we're just testing. But we still need to see which tools will stay and which tools will be operational for us. So I would say the value of the program is to be surrounded by people who are currently leading the digital transformation in major companies and organizations all over Europe. We have classes where I just have exchanges with CIOs, and they discuss how they're trying to embed AI into their structure, and also the challenges that they are facing in doing so, going from governance to ethics, bias, and how this is basically seen at management level. And then there are also other practical aspects of the program, where we just saw, for instance, how two professors are gonna implement their own avatars that they developed. They just created a model trained by themselves with tons of data, information, videos, and hours of videos. And they're going to use these avatars, which we have already used in some classes, to develop courses in Spanish and Portuguese. I've seen these teachers speak 10 languages when they only speak maybe a few. So really the utilities are, I would say, yet to be defined. We see there are many tools available, but we still need to see which tools are really efficient and which tools will stay. But definitely understanding how large language models work and how we build them without having technical skills is very interesting. And then we also see that we have to think about resources and cost, because implementing AI within organizations is also very costly if we talk about actual models, and it also requires a lot of data. But it's been really an inspiring journey, and I'm not yet done, so I will continue to learn more and learn from the colleagues also in the program.
Yeah, it's an absolutely fascinating topic. You know, we've been exploring it. We talked about this, I think, almost a year ago, and you know, we were looking at the beginning of the hype cycle, I would say, because ChatGPT brought AI to the masses, so everybody got to play with a an LLM and started to see how you could create things. Now, I think a lot of people like you and me and Jesus are using this in our daily lives by just going there for content. You know, you create content, you improve content, you do a version of a text, you get ideas, you get structure. You can even start playing with the vision, sorry, the images, or even the videos using Photoshop. But I think that's still very much, it's quite difficult to do without advanced skills. How do you feel, you know, because the promise of AI and the way it's being talked about on LinkedIn by a lot of people say, hey, if you do these three things, you can change your organization. I mean, how do you see this being implemented in a small organization? Because you're talking about CIOs, maybe they're looking at massive implementations, which are really IT projects. In the end, it feels a lot more like an IT project than like a kind of, I don't know, cultural transformation, process transformation. So, what do you think is accessible, and as far as you know so far, to small organizations and individual communicators that go beyond perhaps ChatGPT, Gemini, some of the tools that we're using?
There's one thing. Let's see, for instance, the example of the cloud. I don't know, in your case, we are using the cloud in our organization for everything that is archiving, document sharing, etc. And we have all implemented this, and most of us are using the cloud in our organizations. Doesn't matter if it's a huge or small.
Yeah.
Um, so there are ways in which we can also implement AI, just beyond. I'm not talking about concrete tools that we can use as communicators, but more as an institution and organization, ways in which we can use AI to automate many processes internally. Um, but this again requires, first of all, strategy, and it's not for communicators to lead this. It's really for the actual organizations. And it's true that there are many challenges connected to this, but there are also challenges connected to the cloud, and still we're using it. So I would like to, on the one hand, differentiate between how AI can enhance how we work as institutions and organizations, and then how AI can operationalize the way we work as communicators. And that's where other tools that, like I mentioned before, we are using now, but we might not be using in some months, then come into play. I've just been testing tools with this program where I've implemented, for instance, when it comes to emails, and or on YouTube, I've gotten transcripts in any language of videos, summaries of videos. There are many things that make our work more efficient. Um, but then there's also the other aspect, which is the marketing and communication point of view, where we see, for instance, the AI content potential, and also the challenges that come with it. I think just a few weeks ago, X released this, I think it's called Grok
Yes.
tool. We still need to see, there's no way we can differentiate these images from real images. And the real problem, which is really emphasized in this program, is how we embed the governance of these tools into not only the deployment once they are ready, but also the development of the tools, so that we avoid many issues. And even though we have the EU AI Act, which has also been mentioned in the MIT program, um, I'm wondering myself, how is the regulation connected to the actual tools? Have there been discussions between OpenAI and the regulators, or the ones developing these frameworks? And if not, I think this should be really parallel. Um, and one of the recommendations that I'll mention at the end, one of the books that I'm reading also as part of the MIT program, focuses a lot on the international cooperation and the importance of countries coming together when it comes to regulating generative AI. So back to the question on how we communicators can use AI, and I mentioned the organization aspect already. But I think in our case, communicators, it's a matter of learning as much as possible, testing, and then I think it's only time that will tell which functionalities will stay and will not. In my case, I have many assistants, GPTs, next to me, but now I discovered actually, for instance, how I can play around in the playground on ChatGPT, going beyond just the actual GPT. So there are many usabilities, but there are still many many things to discover, not only us as communicators, but in the actual AI world and those developing the technology.
I think if I may jump there, Raquel, I think you're describing a very exciting moment actually, because we are also testing and trying this kind of things, and I think it's in the moment where we start implementing AI into operations and then combine it with automation. So what we have been seeing, and also even with some clients, is a kind of fear of loss of control, because a lot of those automations then are starting to be taken on decisions of the AI in real time, which is difficult then to control if actually it's going to do or take the right decision in that moment. And that's what is provoking maybe some fear, or how to control that, or how to frame it properly, the AI, not to lead then maybe the communication or the actions to an area that we don't want to. So I think it's very exciting when you're saying that the challenges are there. I don't know if you have confronted with some of these cases where suddenly the AI is publishing or taking actions on places that shouldn't, and then coming back to try to reframe.
Yeah, and even live during the program, we just saw some, because sometimes they have to code to guide the model, and you see live that errors happen, and that's actually from the point of, I'm not a technical person, so not from engineering or anything, but the experts themselves and the engineers in the program were saying this is really how it works, and you see this error lives and or hallucinations as they call them. But I think this is again part of the process, and I'm sure this is, as we've seen another wave. We've talked about the cloud. We've seen many things before. The iPhone come before, or the very first computers, and there's always been an adaptation process. And but I think for this one, like I mentioned earlier, the aspects connected to the governance, ethics are major, and need to be embedded into the development of the tools too. And there's one of the videos that was part of one of the modules, where it's actually the podcast that I have for later. It's an interview with Sam Altman, and it's very very good, very open, and he's very open in all the answers, and he also talks a bit about this himself in the Lex Friedman podcast. So I think it's very important for everyone using it or trying to implement it to be aware of what it actually entails implementing AI. And I honestly think it's been quite open when it comes to how it works. There are many videos available. They do podcast conferences all the time, explaining also the challenges. So of course there are many things we don't know, but I think in this case, given the impact of communications and how it's spreading, I think we are able to learn and to know nowadays a lot about the challenges that we will be facing, and therefore we are hopefully ready to tackle them from the beginning.
Yeah, and I think OpenAI and some Altman in particular have been doing a very good job at engaging with governments on legislation preemptively, and I think that's part of the Bill Gates Microsoft experience, to say, don't wait until it's too late before you engage. And so I think we see a totally different dialogue, and actually at the same time there were a lot of fears that this would go too quickly. And I think now we're in the phase where we're saying, okay, well, it's not that terrible. They're not taking over all the jobs. So I think there's an adjustment now. But actually, it's been used by major companies. And you wanted to talk about an ad campaign run by Nike around Serena Williams and the tennis AI. So tell us a bit about what that's all about.
Yes. So it was one of the case studies that I've done, and I discovered this campaign, which is called Never Done Evolving. And what they have done is recreate with tons of data, so basically footage that they use from Serena Williams from 1999 until 2017. And with amounts of footage, they created a model that was able to have a match, basketball, a tennis match, with the 1999 version with the 2017. And first of all, I think it was unique in the sense that they just were able to have the same person play against the same person with different skills. So talking about time and the time difference, and then it was just a machine learning model that was playing in different styles because it was using different data and different information. They analyzed decisions she was making back then and decisions she was making now, shot selections, reactivity, agility, and you could see live how these aspects and how the whole data set and the footage that they had comes into place in reality. You see how it reacts in different ways. The video was streamed live on YouTube, and I think they had more than 1.6 million viewers. I don't think it's just about the campaign as such when it comes to impactful campaigns, but about the uniqueness of doing a campaign and recreating a match between the same person in different years. So it's about the revolutionary aspect of it that makes it interesting. And then just to go beyond this campaign, there were many aspects of how Nike has been implementing AI into their strategies. From the product design, just recently in Paris, they launched a new prototype called Air that has been designed just by AI. And this model has assessed the dream shoes of 13 athletes, and they developed the model, the dream model for each of these athletes, with tons of information about the personality of these people. So again, you see how data becomes crucial when it comes to AI. Then other uses, for instance, consumer personalization. You have apps that are able to measure your shoe size and give you the right shoe size for X model. Then again, supply chain, for instance, predicting product demand. There are many ways in which AI is implemented nowadays. Also, if we talk about predictions and analyzing data, again, predictive analysis is becoming more and more important. And Nike actually, when doing the research, I discovered that they acquired three firms, data analytics firms, in the around 2015 and 2018. So you see the importance of data for then implementation of AI.
Yep. No, it's incredibly important, and I think you mentioned some very interesting examples. It can be quite challenging for individuals to apply that to their own circumstances and to their organization because they don't have the kind of infrastructure. But I think we're seeing more and more micro implementations of these strategies. Now, moving to something that's kind of more mainstream, but still a challenge, which is social media communication. You've been involved in communication, of course, for EEA Norway grant. And one of the things you've been focusing on is building ambassadors and supporting that inside. So tell us a bit about how is that working inside the organization? How are people using social media, getting comfortable with it, and telling a kind of consistent story?
I think social media, and if you look at the EU sphere, has been something that has changed considerably over the last decade, where we had skepticism at the beginning, and now we see institutions really embrace social media and embed this into their strategies. And in the last years, we have seen more and more user-generated content. We have seen more and more social media ambassadors, institutions starting to play with also influencer marketing, even with mini influencers. So when it comes to the EA and our grants, since what we do is basically fund programs and projects all over Europe, we have a lot of different areas we support, from climate change to culture to health. And we have seen that, first of all, we had staff internally that wanted to have a social media presence, but just needed a push and guidance and support. And that's where we came in. as a communication unit. And over the last years, we have managed to build, I would say, half of the organization and have a social media presence for them. We even have social media ambassadors awards, and we reward the best social media ambassador in the organization. So first of all, we decided that since we have experts in different fields, it was very wise for us to have them communicate about what they do in their fields. Like I said earlier, to have someone working on climate change focus on that. They already have a niche, they already have an audience that is interested in that. And what we do is that we always connect the content to the organizations. We either tag the EA and grants account, we hashtag us, or we mention the program or project they talk about. So there's always a connection. We have seen, for instance, that sharing from the main account when they post on their personal accounts does not work that well. So we are trying just to have the social media ambassadors communicate. But again, then highlight that they are doing that as part of the EA and grants family. And then we have also very recently started to activate our management group, starting with our managing director and the deputy managing director. And first of all, I can say that when it comes to top profiles like leaders, executives, the managing director in our case, it's been impressive to see how the organization itself connects, and people who are not part of the organization now, but who have been there before, reconnect with the organization and start to share content, to engage and comment. So it's really genuine engagements that we cannot have with the main institutional account. But also, if you have a look at the account of our managing director, you will see that the tone is very personal. She posted recently about the summer, saying what she had done during summer. So it's really important that when it comes to activating profiles at institutional level, leaders and executives, the content is really well thought, and it goes beyond having a thought leader on social media, but it has to be someone that people connects to, someone authentic, and someone that is able to build trust not only with people that are part of the organization, but also people that are outside of it. And of course, in our case, it's something very new, but I think it's really the way to go. And just if I can mention one thing, because I've been really analyzing this at EU level. You have, for instance, the European Investment Bank with Nadia Calvino, who joined, I think, 8 months ago, fairly recently. And you can also see the content strategy behind. And if you look at the feed, you will see the evolution of content. They started to post what they call 1 week, 1 minute video formats. So every week they post one video on her account where she talks about what she has done that week. Then they also have a newsletter ahead of the EU elections. She also published a very personal letter talking about the importance of voting. But like I mentioned earlier, the tone and the content is crucial, and then also the channels. I also wanted to mention Emmanuel Macron and the Olympics, because I don't know if you noticed this, but I've had a look at some of the reels he published some days ago, and one of them, actually, some of them have over 5 million. One has 10 million views, another one has 6.4. And some of them are just content from the Olympics. But the fact that with 2 words or 3 words in the copy, but you see that there are many personalities that sometimes just need to use the momentum also to connect and to do it in a genuine way. Because if you have a look at the content Macron posted, it looks genuine, done from the heart, and sometimes that's really what the audiences behind are waiting for. And just to mention, for instance, what also Roberta Metsola or Ursula von der Leyen's account, where you can see there's really a team behind. And I would just emphasize this. We have seen, I mentioned the decade before. I'm sure most prime ministers had or used to have a press officer, but nowadays, luckily, they start to have a social media officer or team behind. So it's really important to have the right skills to implement these and have a proper strategy behind.
Yeah, I think it's what you say is very interesting. By the way, I suspect that Macron, his secret master plan to hold the election before the Olympic Games is probably to say, now we can feel better about France and my government, and maybe things will be better. I think there's something.
There's a lot of that, yes.
Yeah, but coming back to your point, I think what's interesting is that we now have an acceptance that social media is part of your job as an executive. Before it was communication, did communication, you still had to convince them about doing social media. That has that ship has sailed. Now people accept that it's core. But I think now what people are seeing is that it has to be one of the things you have to do as an executive in an organization. And that means you have to tell a story on social media, like it or not, and you have to have a kind of consistent plan. So basically, you become part of the voice of the organization. I think so. I think we're seeing that. I think it's not consistent yet. We don't see it to the same degree in every leader. I think we need to, and this is something that we do with a lot of our clients, is to guide them first to build an organizational narrative, which is what is it that you're trying to say on social media, and then to bring ambassadors into that narrative. So how can you tell the story of climate change through the eyes and the activities of your organization? So you give it a personal voice, but it has to be part of this framework. But I actually, interestingly, despite the fact that we all know that this is very important, it is still relatively new, and it's still something that a lot of organizations haven't baked into their organizational structure. So I think we're going to see that. I'm also curious, because you said you had looked at this in a lot of different things. How does the how does the EU compare to other global organizations in your mind?
Actually, I have to say that many profiles in the EU are using social media very well when it comes to leadership. And if you look at main leaders of organizations at the EU level, or commissioners, or even prime ministers, it's really, you see that there's a team behind and there's a strategy behind. But you also have some institutions at the global level that are not yet where we are at EU level. Just take the World Bank, for instance, and the president, Yai Banga. He doesn't have a presence on LinkedIn, on Instagram. If you look at other institutions, such as the World Economic Forum, and the president, Borge Brende, the Instagram activity is very low, only 5 reels on Instagram so far. So it's really, we're still at the moment where institutions start to acknowledge this and build capacity and start to activate their social media presence. So I think we're actually doing a very good job at an institutional level in the EU.
Yeah, absolutely. I know Jesus has to drop off for a meeting, so great to have you on board, Jesus. Coming back to what you said, Raquel, basically, when people start today in your profession, what is your advice to them? Because you're very involved in AI, in social media. So where should they begin? Should they all take a course at MIT on AI, or what's your advice to people starting?
I think it's never stop learning and adapting. It doesn't matter if it's an MIT program, or it's a podcast, or it's a book, or it's talking to communicators, or to non-communicators. It's really acknowledging that our environment changes every time, and you really have to adapt. And I will just use this quote from Darwin: "It's not the strongest of the species that survives; it's the one that adapts the best." So we really need to learn and then apply what we learn to be able to adapt, and hopefully survive. Hopefully survive.
One of my favorite quotes, we have it in our little intro videos, so fantastic choice. Now it's time for our recommendations, so roll jingle. So you already mentioned some of your recommendations. Tell us what you said our viewers should be listening to, watching, or reading.
Yes, I'll do a summary. So for podcast, I wanted to mention the Social Media Insight podcast. It's done by Dante Licona, who is an independent social media strategist and consultant, and together with Matthias Lufgens, founder of DigiTips. And then this podcast is basically focused on social media purely. And I also recommend people to follow Dante Licona's account on LinkedIn with very interesting updates on social media. Then the second podcast is one done by MIT professor Lex Friedman. He has this long form podcasts with relevant personalities. He interviewed Sam Altman, like I mentioned earlier. He also interviewed Noam Chomsky, Yuval Noah Harari, and also most recently Elon Musk, and relevant personalities. So really recommend it. You can be critical with the personalities he interviews, but definitely it's very insightful to listen to it. And then accounts. I actually remember that last year, exactly at this time during summertime, we talked about the European Parliament, and I mentioned a bit their content strategy, how they started to do behind the scenes. And now that the elections are behind us, I wanted to really give a kudos to the European Parliament and the content strategy they've had throughout the Use Your Vote campaign and the campaign. We had the honor to have the director of campaigns present the campaign in one of our communication workshops very recently in June, and it was very interesting to see the ins and outs, and especially their Instagram account and TikTok account. I think it's the only EU institution that has a TikTok account for now. They created it earlier this year. So I think the content, the multi-channel strategy they've had, the different formats across channels has been very wise ahead of the elections. So wanted to highlight that. And finally, the book, which is also a reading that I'm doing for the course. It's called The Coming Wave by Mustafa Suleiman. And I'm still halfway through, so not done yet, but it focuses, like I mentioned earlier, on the challenges quite a lot. So it talks about the opportunities that AI has, but also the challenges, talks about international cooperation, ethical guidelines, and everything that's needed, hopefully to not end up having a really bad scenario looking at the future, and be able to counter that.
Yeah, I've heard several of his podcast interviews. Very interesting, insightful. I think, interestingly, we've moved away from the kind of doom scenario, which you remember we talked about. What is your doom number, basically? And because now I think people are starting to figure out how to use the tool, and I don't think anyone thinks right now that ChatGPT is about to take over the world. But of course, there's a conversation about what happens in the next 5 years, 10 years, where we believe things will be much more transformational. So I had one tip to share, actually, because it's the summer, people are traveling. And if you're taking an airplane, basically there can be a lot of challenges, including delays and a lot of things. Now, I want to say something. So as most people know, there are passenger rights for the EU, which you can check online and you can see what it is. If your flight is late over 3 hours, you can get it fully reimbursed. And we've actually done this a few times, and it works. And I think most people are so used to the delays that they don't bother claiming all the things they can. So I would strongly encourage you to check what your rights are when you travel. And do all the kind of work it takes, but because they made the forms particularly difficult, but it does work. So that next time you're late, think about it as a free trip offered by the travel agency or the airline that's traveling with you. So that is all we have time for today. Thank you so much for coming online. We'll be checking out your social profile to see what you're learning from your classes and more. So it was great to have you. Have a fantastic weekend.
Thank you, Phil.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.